Okay, part 2. Changed out the disc. It's actually, this camera records on little DVDs, kind of old school. But it's better than using my phone, I think. Getting back to the knives. Where I left off, one thing I wanted to cover was the profile of your knife. And I think you can kind of see it. It's got a bend to it, and that's on purpose. When you buy these brand new, they come flat. And anything above the 6-inch knife here, this you want flat. There's not enough there to bend anyway. But 6-inch knives, you leave them flat. And then 8-inch and up, you're going to want to put a bend to them. And the way you do that is you just take it in your hands, put it over your knee, and give it a little flex. You don't want an excessive bend, but you just want it to where it's got a nice little curve. And there's a reason for that. When you're mudding walls, there's an advantage to using the concave, the bowl-shaped side versus the convex side. Normally what I do is I use the convex side, the side that's bent out like this. And when I'm putting mud on, that allows me to run this mud, give it a little bit of pressure, but it keeps these edges from digging in to your mud layer. And it results in a smoother, oh shoot, I can turn that screen all the way around. Now I can see what I'm doing. And it results in a smoother finish. So you got the convex side here. This is the concave side, the inside bend and the outside bend. When I'm putting mud on and I'm running the knife down and putting a layer of mud on, then what is happening is that these two corners here are actually not touching the wall. So I don't dig a groove on each side of where I ran that knife. Now sometimes I want to use the concave side, the bowl-shaped side, or the inside bend. And I haven't covered it, but sheetrock, the two finished edges on the 4 foot side. So in other words, the width of the panel is 4 feet and it's 8 feet long. Well, the edge here comes with a bevel on it, and it's about 3 inches to either side, or to one side. So if you put this panel of sheetrock on the wall and then you put another piece over the top of it, you're going to have 2 beveled edges that are going to meet up. And what that is a nesting area for your tape and for your initial run of mud. So hence why the taping knife is 6 inches, because you got a 3-inch bevel. It's thinner here, and it gradually goes out to the dimension of the panel. In this case, this is 3/8 I'm going to use for the ceiling in that closet. And so when you have your 2 joints together, you run your tape in the middle, and then you take your 6-inch mud knife and you smear or you place or you smooth in your mud, and it gives you a really nice finish joint. I mean, if you do a good job, then you may have to give it one more skim coat, say with like the 10-inch knife, just to bring your mud lines a little bit further out, and you sand it and you're done. However, when you're butt jointing together, there's no bevel on the 8-foot edges, okay? The top and the bottom, or however you're running it. So when you put tape on this and you put your mud, basically what you got to do is kind of like you see here. See how wide, let me move this. See how wide this mud joint is? When you butt joint panels together with the non-beveled edges, basically what you got to have is you got to have a thicker layer of mud. I'm sorry, I keep using the word I'm sorry. I'm trying to collect my thoughts. You want a thicker layer of mud in the middle to hide that tape, and you don't want to sand through that to the tape, so you got to go wider to the outside of the joint. And if you were looking straight down the wall, I mean just eyeing it, if you could get your head in the corner and eye it, you would see that this mud comes out like, I'm exaggerating of course, but it'll be flat and it'll come out and go back in. And it's got to be like that, but the eye won't see it if you put a nice wide layer of mud and smooth it down real nice. You won't even see it. It camouflages it. So that's why sometimes I use the convex side, or excuse me, the concave side, the inside bend. And what I'll do is I want my knife edges here, the knife corners here, I want that to actually ride on the wall. And what that's going to do, let me get it down where you can see it, what that's going to do is it's going to leave me a layer of mud with a bulge in the middle that feathers to the outside. So, like I said, you want to have a bend in your knife. There's a purpose for using one or the other. Well, we're still on the subject of knives, and I hope I explained that well. If not, send me a question. I've got a couple specialty knives here. We'll talk about the outside corner one first. Let me grab that corner bead I was talking about in the other video. This is corner bead for sheetrock, and what this is for outside corners to protect them. Sheetrock is soft. You want something on outside corners that's going to protect it. Try to spin this around. Such as this right here. This is an outside corner. You can hear it. There's metal on there. That's what you use this this corner bead for. And like I said, when I'm installing this, I prefer to use the drywall nails because they're a thin head. You can go ahead and pound them down. Not enough to start to buckle this, because this is I think it's steel, or at least heavy gauge aluminum. But not heavy gauge. It's thin on the edges here. Okay, so if you use screws, you need to sink those screws down. But when you do that, you'll start to bevel. You'll have bubbles in your edge. It'll start to come up from the tension. So I prefer to use drywall nails in the installation of this corner bead. So anyway, getting back to this knife here. This is an outside corner knife, and I'll be honest with you. I very rarely use this knife. I don't see a reason for it in this application, because let me get my taping knife. have this corner bead installed, I just take, you know, mud and I ride this edge. This edge nut isn't going anywhere. That's a nice sturdy edge. And I run my mud, I press pretty hard because I want to get a good adhesion. I don't want any air pockets in there. And by the time it's all said and done, really this will give you, I mean, this is kind of an exception right now. It's really rough. But this, using that edge there as a guide and just running this knife down, it'll give you a nice coat on either side of this corner. So, like I said, I have one. Don't really use it a lot, but I figured I'd talk about it a little bit in case you saw it at the store and wondered if you needed it. Talk a little bit more about this edge, this corner bead. Having a hell of a time figuring out what it's made out of. I don't have a magnet. I think it might be steel. It is flexible though. I think it might be galvanized steel. This also comes in plastic as well. Don't care for the plastic. I've used plastic in the past for like archways and where I needed something that was going to be flexible, but I would rather use the steel or the metal. Still undetermined about what kind of metal this is, but I would rather use the metal than the plastic. But plastic does work as well. Easier to cut, easier to work with. You can cut the plastic with a heavy pair of scissors, whereas this you're going to need metal cutters. They also have this in a radius profile. I don't like to work with that because then when it comes to time to install your baseboards at the bottom, you need special profile end stops because you can't cut a 45 to fit around a radiused corner. Radius corners are nice though because they're not as sharp and they tend to become, they tend to get damaged less because even these will get damaged if they're hit hard enough. I think that's about it for corner bead. Let me get this out of the way. The other type of knife I want to talk about is a corner knife that I actually do use. That is this knife right here. This is an inside corner knife. You can tell the difference in the profiles. Outside corner, it's got a tighter angle to it, more of a closer to a 90. It's actually more acute than a 90. And this is an inside corner knife. See? Inside corner knife. Large. And I like this knife, especially when I'm running my tape into my corners. What I'll normally do is I'll take my 6-inch knife, got my trough of mud, and I'll go ahead and mud this in on both sides. Okay, and then I'll put mud in there as well on this side. And then I'll take my inside corner knife and I'll stick it in there in the corner. Give it a good push because you want to get that mud into the gaps, the fiber. This is kind of like a netting tape, or it's got a netting pattern to it. And as you can see, we talked about it being self-adhesive. It's sticking in there pretty good. But once I get my initial mud in there, and I'm not worried about it being real smooth or anything like that, just what I'm worried about is quantity, making sure I have enough in there. what I'll do is I'll get my inside corner knife, stick it in there, give it a good push, and smooth that mud out. I don't know if it's showing up, but you can see the ridges here from the edges of this knife, because this is just the initial coat on there. And what that does is it gives me a nice even coat and gives me a fairly sharp corner on that inside corner. So as far as specialty knives go, this is one I definitely recommend that you have. I'm going to talk a little bit about power tools now. First thing, well, let's talk about sanding first. That'll get into power tools, but I'm going to talk about different sanding implements. First one, pretty sure everybody knows or is familiar with a quarter sheet palm sander. Let me get this up. Right here, quarter sheet palm sander. What that means is basically you get 4 sanding sheets out of a standard 8x11. I think it's 8x11. Excuse me. Sandpaper, sheet of sandpaper. And this is the 6th one I've bought in the last couple of years. I'm going through these. I use this in conjunction with the shop vac. You can see the vacuum attachment here, and the shop vac helps reduce the dust. You can see the holes. There's a plate floating around here somewhere. It comes with the sander, and you put it on the bottom and you pop it and it pokes holes in predetermined spots that coincide with the pad down here, and that is so that your vacuum can suck the dust through these holes and into the vacuum. In theory, great. In practice, not so much. These things still leak dust around the edges, and these cooling ports here suck it right into the sander, and it burns your sanders up. Drywall dust is not good for anything, which brings me to the point you should always, even using a sander, wear a respirator as well, or at least a dust mask. Gypsum on its own is not toxic, however, you don't want that crap in your lungs. So this is a quarter sheet sander. The next one I'll talk about, this is a 3rd sheet sanding block. Actually, this is designed to take a pole to extend your reach. That way you can sand ceilings. And I don't care for it. I mean, unless you're looking for a workout and you know, you got good shoulders, which unfortunately I don't. Thank you, United States Navy, for that. But you know, it's for overhead work and for sanding your joints on the ceilings. You can use it to sand walls as well. I don't have a pole here, but the pole screws in. Just a standard wooden pole that you can buy at any hardware store, and that'll allow you to reach hard to reach spots. Like I said, though, I don't care for it. My shoulders aren't the greatest, so enough about that. But even with the quarter sheet palm sander here, you know, I'm good for about 3 hours for overhead work. Wall work, I can do it all day long. But overhead work on the ceilings, I'm good for about 3 hours, and that's about the extent of how much my shoulders can take. You know, holding this thing up against the ceiling and sanding it. especially when you're talking about you got a vacuum hose here and that's pulling on you. It's a lot to overcome. And so in the corner, I'm going to try something new. And when I say new, I just got it today. It just came in the mail. Actually, FedEx. This is an electric drywall sander, a pole sander. And I haven't even used it yet. Comes with two heads. Got the round head that's on it right now. And here's the vacuum hose that hooks into the vacuum. I think I'm gonna have to get an adapter so that'll work in my vacuum, because my hose is a lot bigger than that. My hose is a 2.5 inch. Let me get this in frame. 2.5 inch shot back, or 2 inch, something like that. But anyway, we're gonna give this a shot. One thing I have found is that it is heavy. It's got some weight to it. Well, but I like that I can hold the weight further down. I'm sorry, let me try to get this in frame. I like that I can hold it down lower instead of my arms being up above my shoulders, my hands above my shoulders. I'll actually be able to keep it, the center of gravity or the weight, more downward than trying to hold it overhead. So we're going to give this a shot. This is the actual sander. Again, I have to adjust the camera. This is the actual sander. Comes with two heads. This is the round, I think they're 9 inch. And let me turn it here so you can get the full Monty. And it also comes with a triangular head, which is nice and stuck to the carpet. This is the triangular head. So this is more for your edges, or excuse me, your corners. Working your corner seams. The round one would be more for your walls, your wall seams here. I mean, you could use this as well, but and also for your seams. Once you get out from that corner there, you'd switch to the round head to work those mud joints, those mud seams. So I might make a whole new video just about this sander here. We'll see how it goes. And you can get different grits of paper for it. It is hook and loop or Velcro. And you can get like 60 grit, 80 grit, 120, 150, all the way up to like 240. Depending on how much mud you got to remove and whether it's your final finish coat. Let's see, still talking about sanding. This right here is got a lot of mud on it because it was just sitting under where I was mudding. But this is a little gem right here. This is called a sanding sponge, and you can get them in coarse, medium, and fine grit. You can get sponges that have a combination of grits, be coarse on one side and fine on the other, medium on the other, or it'd be coarse and medium, or you get a medium and a fine coarse. This one happens to be a medium coarseness. It's got a foam core, but what I like about it is it's got a nice sharp profile right here in this on this edge here, all the way around. And what I especially like these sponges, these sanding sponges for, are sanding corners. Because you can get into this corner let me turn my view screen, make sure I stay in frame. You can get into this corner and work this back and forth, and in effect what you're doing is you're cutting a nice sharp corner into the interior of the corner, and you're beginning to sand away the excess on either side evenly by working with this. And of course you're going to get a wider sand on this side than this side, so then you just switch. Like that to start evening it out. And I've used power sanders in corners, you know, the palm sanders and whatnot. And what winds up happening is it starts playing pinball in there. You know, you run it up and the edge goes, and it starts actually digging in to the opposing side because it's an orbital action. So it's